1-year visas, which is okay. They cut you off after 10 years, and then you have to think of something else after 10 years ago. The rules change all the time. You know, you can't
look into the DTP. That's what I'm wondering. It's fairly new. Like, are you just sort of freewheeling your visa situation, or do you have any association or like leg up being government?
Well, we can get the visa through the Ministry of Buddhism.
Yeah.
Get 1-year visas. So, my visa comes up just when there's a load of ceremonies and they shut the ministry. And I went to the visa office. I got mine like 2 days before it expired, and I went there and I said, look, there's hundreds of kids who've been waiting for their letter. If their visas are expiring, it's not their fault. The ministry is shut, and the visa, oh yeah, we know about that. Still going to fine you. Worldly matters. There was a monk, he tried to get his visa through as a retiree because he was over 55. He had some money in the bank, he had all the qualifications, and he turned up at the office, said, you're a monk, you go to the Ministry of Buddhism. It's like, no, I'm an Englishman and I qualify for a retirement visa. This is no, to go. It wasn't me, I was not. I've only just turned 56, so I guess I qualify now, but yeah. Anybody not done meditation before? You're new to meditation. Okay, how did you get this far through life? Never.
I'm pretty young.
Okay.
That's a very good answer.
Okay, so I'll give a few instructions to get started. For those of you who have your own meditation system, feel free to carry on with the system you are accustomed to. So settle yourself into comfortable position. We're going to sit together for 25 minutes or so. The first step for any meditation system is to tie your attention to a meditation object. These can be mantras, colors, visualizations, but we usually recommend the breathing. So try to find the sensation of the breath as it runs through the center of the body. Put your attention onto that physical sensation. You may follow the sensation as it rises and falls through the center of the body. Or you may just like to stop your attention still. Try to be with each in-breath and out-breath. The breathing is a neutral object. It's not exciting or enticing. It's not unpleasant. Being able to stop still, rest comfortably with a close, familiar, neutral object is our entry point into meditation. as you watch the breath begin, last for a while, and then cease, with a slight gap between the breaths. Just allow the breathing to be natural, no need to control it. If the breathing starts to accelerate, just leave it alone. It will settle down. If the breathing starts to disappear, just leave it. You can go a long time with just very shallow breaths. Allow the breathing to be natural. After a few moments or a few minutes watching the breath, the mind will naturally wander away. It will think in, out, understood. And then it will go off thinking about some other thing. That story has now captured your attention. You've lost mindfulness and entered into a story. When you realize that's happened, you stop, note the story, thinking about food, about family, life, work, politics, music, whatever it is. Be willing to drop the story. Insofar as a story will command and demand your attention, insofar as a story will compel you to think about it, it has power over you. Insofar as you're able to let go of any story, drop it, however compelling, this will start to open up freedom from your own mind, freedom from your own thinking. So be willing to drop whatever story it is and come back to the breathing, just a simple, neutral meditation object. For those more experienced in meditation, please note you do not need a meditation object. That's only to stabilize you, only as a touch point to remember. Be willing to drop the meditation object, whatever you have, so long as you can remain mindful, remain present. Just noting the difference between being present and being lost is all the meditation method that you'll need. be patient with your breathing. Any thoughts, sounds, feelings, anything that comes up, allow it to be there. No need to get entwined. Animals are able to sit and breathe. We should be able to too. for the final 5 minutes of the meditation. Call into mind the idea of loving kindness, metta, the universal well-wishing for all world beings. Generate a sincere wish that all beings be happy, peaceful and free from suffering. You may arouse the idea of loving kindness by reflecting on people or even animals whom you have loved, from gurus or grandparents or pets, any way that you can arouse this feeling of love. You may use visualization, radiating light, or flowers in your heart. Or you may use the words, may all beings be happy, peaceful, free from suffering. Any way that you can arouse this beautiful quality is good. We seek to arouse this beautiful mind state. We seek to maintain this beautiful mind state. We seek to protect this mind state from unwholesome thoughts and ideas. Generating that sincere wish for all world beings, including ourselves. From heavens to human realms, animal realms, hell realms, all beings seen and unseen, near, far away, coarse or refined. Including those people and beings who you know, including those people who have hurt you or abused you, including those people you interact with or meet with daily, without condition. Make your heart bright with loving kindness and use this as your meditation object. The more you practice a state of mind, the easier it is for that state of mind to arise again in the future. If we put our attention onto things that cause us fear, annoyance, unhappiness, we're just practicing those states of mind. So in the meditation, we always try to generate a beautiful state and practice that. Then these beautiful states will be quick and easy to arise again in the future. Sabbe buddha balapata pachekanancha yang balang arahantanancha tejena rakang bandami sabhaso sabba buddha nubhavena sattha soti bhawantute Sabbe buddha balapata pachekanancha yang balang arahantanancha tejena rakang bandami sabhaso Sabba sangha nubhavena sattha soti bhawantute Sabbe buddha balapata pachekanancha yang balang arahantanancha tejena rakang bandami sabhaso Sabba sangha nubhavena sattha soti bhawantute. So relax your posture. So your first meditation session. Trying to remember the first time I tried to do meditation. Yeah, a long time ago. Okay, this evening I have a rather strange topic, skew-if. Many of you who know me know that I really love story. And story is a way to contain ideas, teaching ideas. The idea of a story is that story will go into the heart, into the psyche, in a much more powerful way than simply telling somebody what to do. So a good example for this is fairy tales. Fairy tales are there to try and teach people, teach children especially, on certain qualities that they should be developing. So if we use a story to tell it, it's going to enter into the psyche a lot better. One of my favorite stories, just to exemplify, when I was young, I had a teacher and she told us the story of the sun and the cold north wind having a competition. Do you know this story? Nobody? The sun and the cold north wind, they have a bet on who is strongest. So the bet is, who can make the man down below take his coat off? So the cold north wind comes down and blows and blows and blows, and the man just huddles tighter and tighter into his coat. And eventually the north wind gives up. He can't make the man take his coat off. And then the sun just beams happily down on the man and he takes his coat off. Okay, nice little simple, clear story. You know the meaning of the story? This is the annoying thing, that they would never explain the meanings of the stories. And I remember the teacher telling this story, and she didn't understand what the meaning was. So you lose the whole value of the story. The meaning is, if you want people to like you, be nice. So when you interact with other children, if you want the child to like you, don't be like the cold north wind and blow at them and be harsh. Just be nice and shine at them warmly. Then people will accept you. So that's an image that can go into the heart of a child that they can relate to very easily. Oh, I'm being like the cold north wind, or that person's being like the cold north wind. So this is the idea of stories, that the story will exemplify things, and then it's easier to carry that idea around with you. So then we come to Wagner, Richard Wagner, and what did this decidedly unpleasant German man from whenever, 150 years ago or something, what things did he have to impart? What nuggets of wisdom did he have to impart? He was a rather unpleasant man. I'm not just making that up. He was also one of the foremost scholars of Buddhism for his age in Germany, which was actually the hotbed in Europe. The Buddhist sutras were just arriving, just being translated into languages. They were picking up these amazing concepts that they'd not heard before. And Wagner was one of the great scholars of this. He was also a mythologist, that he had worked with European myths for a very long time, telling them in his operas. So he actually recognized that the story of the Knights of the Round Table, King Arthur's Knights of the Round Table, and the story of Maitreya Buddha are actually the same story. This is called the hero's journey, but this specific version of the hero's journey is called the Fisher King. And there are certain elements to this story which we'll go through one particular aspect this week, and then next week do in a bit more general sense. So the elements to this story, you have a young innocent man who's brought up in a forest by a mother who protects him from the world. Hopefully those of you who know Buddhism are already drawing the parallels here. Then one day through the forest come 4 knights in shining armour. And this young man is very enamored by these knights. He's like, wow, I want to be like them. His mother doesn't want him to go. So he will leave the home and the family, and he'll go off to become a knight. He will meet an old man, something like the fairy godfather. He'll meet an old man who will give him some pieces of advice. Often the advice is not very clear, but one of the pieces of advice that he will often get is, don't talk too much. He will then move on, and the old man often giving him some pointers of where to go to. Some of our younger audience, or maybe not so much these days, Star Wars followed this to a large degree. So Obi-Wan Kenobi was the old knight. Actually represents the old religion. So it's the teaching, but the teaching coming from people who don't understand the teachings or don't have the full attainment. So you can think of it like a great guru, and then he dies and he has a bunch of disciples. The disciples don't know what he knew, so they're kind of lesser, and so on and so forth, until eventually you just get the followers, the monks and the nuns and the hermits and the saints and sages, but they don't know what the original teacher knew. So after meeting this old man, Asita is another one of his names, if you know your mythology, he'll go on to the Grail Kingdom. Now the Holy Grail goes way back before Christianity, and the Holy Grail was a cauldron, or sometimes a tablecloth, or sometimes a horn, which would provide food endlessly free of charge, without you having to pay a consequence. So if it was a tablecloth, you put the magic tablecloth on the table, and all the food that you would ever want appears, without cost, without you having to pay a price. The Horn of Plenty, I don't know if you've had that. I used to have the ice creams were called the Horn of Plenty, but it's actually a mythological symbol, and this horn would empty out food and drink. So the Holy Grail represents that happiness that is endless and has no price. So it actually represents the highest of the spiritual ideals, or in Buddhism represents enlightenment. Enlightenment is happiness without cost. Now happiness with cost is sense desires. So you get your ice cream, you have a cost, you've got to buy it, you have a cost, it's going to go on your stomach or your thighs. There's always a cost to it. If you have too much of it, it starts to become unpleasant. So sense desires are little bits of happiness that come with cost. And they're not endless. You have to continually work for them. Purified consciousness, and this is actually true. If you touch purified consciousness, it provides happiness without cost. It's not based on sense desires. When the consciousness is pure by itself, it will automatically generate happiness. That's its nature. It takes some meditation to touch this. So, in this story, Parsifal, or Percival, the Knight of the Round Table, he leaves the home, he leaves his mother, he goes off, he wants to be a knight, he meets the old man, he's told not to talk too much, he's taken to the Grail Kingdom, and he's shown the Holy Grail, which later became the cup from the Last Supper when it became Christianized. But he fails to ask the right question. If he asks the right question, he'll become enlightened and will become the king of the Grail Kingdom. But he fails to ask the right question. If you have any guesses as to what the right question may be, think of it. I'm going to ask you in a minute. Then he gets thrown out of the Grail Kingdom, and then he has to wander around in the world for a long time. Eventually he comes across the opposite kingdom, the evil guy's kingdom. In this case, the evil one is called Klingzor. But you'll notice that Klingzor is exactly Mara, the god of delusion in Buddhism. And he will have a fight with Klingzor, have a battle, which he will win. And he'll win the battle by renouncing desire. That renunciation, that rejection of desire, is what will empower him. Now, in this story, in Buddhism, usually then you become enlightened, but in this story, Parsifal still has to wander around the kingdom for some years, till he finds his way back to the Holy Grail Kingdom, and then takes his rightful place as the new king of the Holy Grail. The old king of the Holy Grail always has a wound that cannot heal. So he's always suffering, and no matter what he does, he can't get rid of the suffering. When Parsifal, or sometimes it's Gawain, or sometimes it's the Red Knight, in older myths, pre-Christian, and there's other characters that do it, they will usually find a weapon, some kind of weapon, and touching the weapon on the wound will heal the wound. So the old king gets healed, but the new guy becomes the new king. He is wise through compassion, powerful through innocence. Again, this is where they got Luke Skywalker from. If you notice Luke Skywalker in Star Wars, you've seen Star Wars. Okay, some people haven't seen Star Wars. Dreadful. So the character of Luke Skywalker in Star Wars is supposed to be this simple innocence. That's why his character can't develop through the stories, and why Disney tried to give him more character. He was not supposed to have character. He's supposed to represent innocence. And in the first episode, you'll see him drinking milk, which represents being supported by the world and being innocent. In the 8th movie, he drinks the milk from the horrible sea creature, and the milk is green. Do you remember this part? Anybody? You do? Okay, one person. So the green, what it means is that innocence now, that he was supposed to be the powerful through innocence, but that milk has turned sour, and that's why they made the milk coming from a horrible monster, and it's green. Because he's now the old guy. He's now the Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Rey is now the new innocent hero. Bear with me. So that's the basic outline of the story of Wagner's opera, and he took this from the story of Maitreya Buddha, that Maitreya Buddha will have been introduced to the idea of enlightenment through meeting a previous Buddha. All Buddhas have met a previous Buddha, and they've made a resolution to become a fully enlightened Buddha. So he's already seen the grail, the result, the enlightenment. But Maitreya Buddha will have to go through years of trials and practices and things before he can take his place as the new king. So that was Maitreya Buddha. Maitreya Buddha, when he's getting enlightened, will be attacked by Mara, the god of delusion. the god of delusion will send his 3 daughters to distract the Buddha to be from enlightenment. And it's his rejection of these 3 daughters that will enable him to become enlightened. So these are the story motifs. And this goes on, like so many stories that you can find. There's even a Robin Williams movie called The Fisher King, where they tried to update it into new motifs. I don't think it worked very well, but... So in this story, in Wagner's version of the story, he has a female character called Kundry. And if you look at Wagnerian scholars, or people who go and see the opera, who manage to sit through 4 hours of dreary Germanic, what's the word, like heavy boom music? Drudge. You probably tell I'm not a fan of Wagner's music. I should probably listen to it properly someday. And they're always mystified by this character called Kundry and her role in the story, because her behavior seems very bizarre. And so a lot of discussions about why did she do this and this and it seems to not make sense to anybody. It's a famously difficult character, and most people accuse Wagner of being a bad story writer and just having a character that does a bit of this and a bit of that, has no consistency and no form. And they're all wrong. And I have the right answer. And you heard it here first. So Kundry, in the first scene, 3 acts of the story. The first act, Parsifal comes to the Grail Kingdom. The second act, he overcomes the evil lord. And the third act, he takes his rightful place as king. In the first act, as he's coming to the Grail Kingdom, he's innocent, but innocent through not knowing. So he actually shoots a swan, and they're all saying, "Why did you shoot this swan? This is so evil. Do you not have compassion for the swan?" And he says, "It's because I didn't know." So that's the innocence through not knowing, rather than innocence through purity. When he comes into the kingdom, the old king is there with a wound in his side, a wound that makes him suffer and it will not heal. Kundry, this character, is a wild, dishevelled woman with her clothes all ragged and breathless, and she appears like very suddenly and with a lot of energy in the story. And she has a balm or some kind of ointment to give to the king to ease his suffering. Once she gives it to him and he applies it, and he says, "Well, it makes it a bit better, but not much." I'm probably making it a bit English here, but... and then she falls down on the floor and says, "Oh, to die, to die. To go to sleep, to have comfort in sleep, to never to be awakened again." So these people look at this play and like, well, what? This is just a dumb character. So the meaning of Kundry in this story, she represents desire. And in the first instance, for an ordinary, regular person, you suffer, you have pain and trouble and tribulations, and people die, and bills need paying and whatnot. So you suffer. In order to deal with your suffering, you have little bits of pleasure that can't give you lasting happiness. So you take comfort in people, in food, in eating, in traveling, hiking, whatever it is that you like to do. These activities will give you some relief from the suffering, but if you have an existential knowledge, if you understand life, you'll know that life has this suffering built into it. First noble truth of Buddhism. So desires will give you relief from suffering. But the nature of desire is that it wants to remove itself. Right? If you want What do you want? I went to the place up here the last time I was here. I wanted vegetarian sausages. And 4 times out of 5 when I go there, either they don't have them or the shop is shut. True enough, when I got there, they didn't have them again. Thwarted my desire. If I get my sausages, what I'm trying to do is remove the unpleasant desire. Right? This is seeing desire in its actual form inside the psyche. Smoking is another example, if any of you are ex-smokers like I am. We would always reach for a cigarette because we desire a cigarette, but you smoke the cigarette because you want to remove the craving for the cigarette. So desire has the nature of always wanting to kill itself, always wanting to die. And that's why when she brings the ointment, it gives him some relief, and she lies there, please let me die, let me die. So it makes perfect sense, right? This is desire. This is how to present desire in story. Wagner really knew what he was doing. This is not coincidence. And he wrote about these things in detail. So in the second act, we go to the evil kingdom. And the evil lord, he summons Kundry to his kingdom. He calls her up, and she's, oh, not to be called by you, not to be driven by you. And he's, ha ha, I have power over you, I can make you do what I want. That's my way of putting it. Wagner had a different way. So she reluctantly comes into under his power, and he can command her to do what he wants. Now, rather than being disheveled and breathless and wanting to die, she's this beautiful, beautiful maiden or woman. So Parsifal approaches the kingdom, and the evil lord sends his soldiers to attack. And Parsifal, because he's innocent, can defeat all the soldiers quite easily. You may notice a direct parallel with the story of Samson and Delilah. Samson could defeat 1,000 Philistines using the jawbone of a donkey. Donkeys representing stupidity or innocence, right? So Parsifal easily defeats all the knights, but then the maidens of the knights, these are called the flower maidens, the evil lord calls them up, and they come over to seduce Parsifal. They say to him, oh, you have killed our young soldiers, now you must give us attention. If you don't give us attention, we will wither and die. And at first he gives them attention, and then he thinks, no, wait, you're trying to distract me from something. And they beg him, no, give us your attention. So again, these are desires that come up. First thing you have to battle is your own tendencies, so you use a force of will for that. But then you have to battle all your desires that come up like beautiful maidens trying to seduce you. So he rejects the maidens, and then finally the evil lord Klingzor, he sends Kundry to seduce Parsifal. And first of all, she starts telling him stories about his mother, which he didn't know, about his father, which he didn't know. And then eventually will kiss him. And as she's kissing him, and he's getting seduced, he will suddenly stop and reject her and push her away. And she's obviously very upset about this. She thought she could, she's being disempowered. But she gazes at him admiringly. Then, just to finish that section, he will come to the evil Lord Klingzor himself, and Klingzor will throw the spear, has a spear, and will throw the spear at Parsifal to kill him. Again, following precisely the Buddhist story that when the Buddha is getting enlightened, the evil armies of Mara will attack him with swords and spears. The swords, spears, and arrows will turn to flowers around him. In this story, Parsifal catches the spear. And when he catches the spear, which is the weapon of delusion, the evil lord is defeated. He no longer has a weapon. So in this second act, the character of Kundry, totally different from the first act. Now she's this beautiful seductress who has to be rejected. Again, Kundry is desire, not desires. Desires are the flower maidens, came up to tempt him. It's not a matter of rejecting desires, but going past the entire nature of desiring itself. Only when you get past desiring itself can you start to attain to enlightenment. So Buddhism has first noble truth, suffering. Second noble truth, this suffering arises from a cause. Third noble truth, that cause, desire that lingers here and there, must be removed. This is the third noble truth of Buddhism, which is in all schools of Buddhism have these four noble truths. So that idea of overcoming desire, that's purely Buddhist, well, any mystic path, but is a Buddhist story element. So it's his rejection of her. Now she falls down, but she gazes at him admiringly, but she's lost all of her strength. In the third act, Parsifal wanders around now. He has this spear. I guess he doesn't know what to do with it. He wanders around for some time until he finally arrives back at the kingdom of the Holy Grail. At the kingdom of the Holy Grail, the old master, the Obi-Wan Kenobi, finds Kundry dead in a bush, and he pulls her out and wakes her up and warms her up and calls on her to reawaken. As she reawakens, now she will provide water for the old knight, and when Parsifal arrives, she will get water and she will clean his feet. Now feet always have a very strong, or especially shoes, have a strong significance in story because they represent action. And taking your shoes off represents stopping action. You're not doing anything anymore. And this is what we're doing in meditation. We're stopping all that action of the mind. So cleaning the feet has a very strong significance. She fetches water. Water represents purified consciousness. It actually literally appears like that. It appears as bright and fluid. So now, as Parsifal meets her again, Parsifal is now able to command her to do what he wants her to do. And what he wants her to do is to look after the people in the kingdom, to do good things. So this represents the third form of desire in the Buddhist concept. First of all, it's the thing that will bring you some relief and happiness. Secondly, you realize it's the thing that's causing the suffering in the first place and needs to be overcome. And then finally, desire becomes that thing which you can use, which becomes a servant of the enlightened mind. Again, that's actually Mahayana more than Theravada. Mahayana has much more emphasis on desire transformation, or bringing desire under control and making use of it rather than simply the rejection of it. So that's why you have this character. She has three totally separate personalities through the three scenes, through the three acts. And this flummoxes people who see this play and think, what, this character doesn't make any sense. But now I've told you, it makes perfect sense, right? Ish?
Yes.
It makes sense. These are the three natures of desire. To one who is practicing, this is what we will experience. The funny thing is, I was working on this project with my good friend, the film director, and we were going to do a full 4-hour Asian iconography version. He rightly identified that this story of Parsifal, the Knight of the Round Table, is the story of Maitreya. Wagner himself said so. And he said, I will not use the Asian or the Buddhist motifs or iconography because people won't understand what they mean. I have to use the symbols that people are familiar with. So he realized that this story of the Knights of the Round Table actually is the story of enlightenment. So you can say either he's trying to tell the Buddhist story in Christian iconography, or he's just telling the story of enlightenment, which is how I prefer to interpret it. So I was working on this for a while with my good friend. He's trying to raise $20 million to do this production. It didn't come off in the end. We worked on a bunch of projects that didn't work, and some that did, including one for Merfalo Royal Foundation. And so while we were working on it, he gave me the script, and he said, what do you think of this? Has this got anything to do with Buddhism? And I read it, and I came back and said, this is Maitreya Buddha. And he said, you got it. You're the first person I met who got it, even though Wagner says so in his notes. So he got very excited. This friend of mine, he's very excitable, German, Austrian guy. And he called up a Wagnerian scholar from Germany, this guy called Professor Borkmeier. He's a very high, I didn't know, but Wagner stuff is like serious stuff. Like they have massive shows, I mean, millions and millions of dollars poured into this, prestigious magazines. You have scholars who dedicate their entire life just to Wagner studies. I mean, I didn't know any of this. So he called up this professor, and the professor came over, and he called me up and said, okay, we're going to do a presentation on why Parsifal is not just the Knight of the Round Table, but is the story of Maitreya Buddha. He said, there are three of us, me, you, and this Professor Borkmeier, and we'll do it at the Goethe Institute. I was like, all right. Always up for, if there's lunch involved, I'll be there. And so I turn up, and what I'd done is for each of the characters in the story, I'd written out, I typed up this thing, which I haven't read this for 20 years till I read it this morning. It's actually pretty good, although I say so myself. So I typed this up. This is Kundry, the one character, and I describe why in the 3 acts she's the way that she is. This is just notes for my friend. This is not a paper or anything. It's just, I wrote it up for Titus so that I can lay out in detail how this story works. So I get to the Goethe Institute thinking, you know, the 3 of us are going to do a talk for, 20, 30 people. And there's like 100 people. And there's ambassadors there, and the scholars who've flown in from around the world are there. There's simultaneous translation into 6 different languages. I was like, Jesus, I'm not prepared for this. Like, I was just going to go and talk a little bit. I wasn't used to public speaking either. And I had this exact document in my hand. And then the organizers come up to me and they said, oh, okay, so have you got your paper for distribution? And I went like that, and they whipped it out of my hand, and she ran off and printed this thing out. This is not an academic paper. This is just what I typed up overnight for my mate. And they printed this off and then distributed it around to everybody. I was absolutely, how to say politely, pooing my pants at this point, because like all these like dignitaries and impressive scholars. And then we had 3 hours. The 3 of us had to talk for 1 hour each on this topic. Titus, my film director friend, he's got an ego the size of Texas. I hope he's not watching on video. So he talked for 2 hours, right? Then I was like, Professor Borkmeier, I was like, go ahead. He talked for 1.5 hours. We were already 30 minutes over time. And I said, well, I have an awful lot prepared for you today, but we've already gone over time, so we'll go straight to questions and answers. And I didn't have to say anything. And afterwards, a number of people came up to me and said, "Oh, we could see you really had a lot to say about this subject," which I do. But I had no idea how I was going to say it. So I dodged a bullet on that one. Forward about 4 or 5 years, I suddenly started getting hits on my website. And at that time, if somebody linked into your website, Google would tell you where they came from. They don't do that anymore. And they were all coming from this place in Germany. So I clicked on the links and I went through and there was all this stuff in German. And I found now we have auto-translate, right? Those days it was a bit more difficult. But I found a translating service. And there was this exact document all done in beautiful, in this Wagnerian magazine. Beirut? What's the name of the place? Beirut, right. So it's the Beirut magazine, which is the number 2 Wagnerian magazine. I didn't get in the top one, apparently. So there it was all listed all there, my analysis of why Kundry is perfectly consistent character coming from Germany. They didn't give me any money. But, you know, got my name, they put my website and stuff there, so yeah, there's a funny little story of how I came to be almost famous in the Wagnerian world. I haven't pursued it since because we were supposed to do this movie, and Tita's got a long way in raising the money. Half the money was coming from China, and then China, they balked. If we'd kept it as the Knights of the Round Table, they would have funded it. But because the whole point is we're saying this is the story of Buddhism, they backed off in the end, and they were providing half the funds, and so the deal fell through. So for 20 years I've sat on this, and I haven't put stuff out there because I wanted... My friend Tita's asked me, he said, don't put anything out there, this is my idea, and I'm going to... but I haven't seen him for 15 years, so I figure it's public domain now. So that's what I wanted to bring out to you tonight, the character of Kundry. Next week we'll talk a little bit more about the story and how it involves the end of suffering. But today I wanted to focus on this Buddhist idea of the nature and the role of desire. It will bring relief to ordinary people for your suffering. It will be recognized as the problem itself to one who advances in the meditation. And then finally, desire will become under the power of the enlightened being, so it becomes a servant rather than something that will distract you. Okay? The first time in 20 years that I've talked about this. I did a better job than I did at the Goethe Institute, that's for sure.
Are you going to follow up on this next week?
Yeah, so next week I'll talk about the end of suffering. This week just wanted to focus on the nature of desire in Buddhism and in Wagner. Wagner understood this and he wrote about it quite clearly. In fact, the character of Kundry wears a snakeskin girdle. I'm not sure what a girdle is, but anyway. Now, snake always represents something that dies and gets reborn because it sheds its skin. So that's the nature of desire, is as soon as you've got that thing of desire, that desire dies, and then it pops up as another desire. That's why she wears a snakeskin. So Wagner was very, very clear about this, and in his notes, he put this in black and white. This isn't speculation. In fact, his final opera, which didn't get published, was actually the story of Ananda, the Buddha's attendant, using the name Ananda and Buddha and etc. So yeah, he really knew what he was talking about.
You probably told us a great deal more about Wagner than we knew before. So has anybody got any questions? How come Wagner is so unpopular in Israel?
Well, Hitler loved Wagner. Hitler, you know, he wiped a lot of culture out, but he loved Wagner, so he made Wagner an honorary Nazi. So for that reason, Wagner became unpopular. Now, he was not a very pleasant person, and eugenics or genetic superiority was a very big thing in Europe at the time, which Wagner was part of. But, I mean, he was writing operas. He wasn't a political campaigner. So it's a bit of a shame that he got... Because he...
with the genetic brush.
It just, if you haven't got the timeline, but Wagner was before Hitler. So, yeah, we can't paint him as a Nazi. That's not fair. He wasn't a very pleasant person, but many geniuses aren't.
Yeah, I'm wondering what
Okay,
you make
go ahead,
of
Jeff.
the part where it's the spear, and the summary of the opera that I read on the Metropolitan Opera version is that the spear was the one that was used to wound Jesus when he was on the cross.
Right.
And that Kundry has had all these lifetimes after lifetimes of penance for this because she made fun of Jesus when he was on the cross. And that's why she's had to be reincarnated so many times, and that's why she wants to die, because she wants to finally be absolved of her sin. That's the way it is.
People come up with these theories, but they don't realize it's the nature of desire to want to kill itself. That's the point. You reach for the cigarette because you want to eliminate the desire for the cigarette. It's perfectly clear. She was also the one that when the evil lord was attacking the good guy, whose name is Amfortas, she seduced him and led him away, and that's what got him defeated. So she felt a guilt because she was the cause of his wound. But that means desire is the cause of suffering, the third noble truth.
But what I wanted to ask is the irony of, in the final act when Parsifal gets the spear back, he uses the spear to heal the wound
Right.
of the king. And isn't that ironic? It's the spear that heals the wound that was caused.
Right.
So what do you make of that, that this same spear that caused the wound also comes back to heal the wound?
So putting the Christian overlays onto the story was the second of the Parsifal tales. They started in about 1000 AD. About 1200 there was a second version called Joseph of Arimathea. And this is when the Grail became the cup from the Last Supper that caught the blood of Jesus while he's on the cross, and the spear became the spear that was put into Jesus' side. But this came much later, of course. The idea of the Grail as being the endless provider goes back long before Christianity. In all of these stories, there is always a weapon. And the weapon will seemingly be insignificant, but will have that ability to cure. So Luke Skywalker has his lightsaber, right? This is what was bestowed on him. This was his father's lightsaber. So the weapon, usually in Buddhism, is a sword. So if you see Tibetan Buddhism, they always have, after you do all the meditations, you get the sword of Vipassana. The sword of Vipassana can cut through what is true and false. So there is always a weapon in these stories. In this story of Parsifal, the weapon isn't, they don't make a lot out of the weapon, but yeah.
Yeah, but it's like, some mythologists have said that they use the phrase that the healing is in the wound itself. And so some psychologists say it's the same thing, like if you've been abused as a child, most people want to say, oh, I want to forget about it, I don't want to think about it, but they never really heal it. But that they'll say that if you really want to heal that wound, you have to go into
Well, it's very Freudian.
Simple, yeah.
You had a question? Go ahead.
Just hold it.
I was wondering if all desires are actually bad.
If what?
All desires are actually like a bad thing.
Right.
Because you said that desires are a sign of suffering. But what if there was desires like
Good
good
stuff.
actions, and what if there was desire for giving back? And when that desire is released, then you get more of these good desires from wanting to give back more because you feel happiness from giving back.
Right, so desire has that nature that it can provide good things, and it can provide motivation, and motivation for good things. There's a story of the Sai Il, or the journey to the west with the monk, the horse, the pig spirit, monkey spirit, and the sand spirit. The pig spirit represents desire, and he's gone into a village and he's captured the maiden of the village, and he has her locked up in a house for his own personal wife. So he's bad, but he also tills all the fields and manages all the crops and feeds everybody. So very often in stories you get this dual nature of desire. On the one hand, it does provide the things that you have to do. On the other hand, it itself is going to be the cause of problems. In Buddhism, in Enlightenment traditions, the reason desire itself has to be overcome. It's not the things that you desire, because compassion is another form of desire. Desire to meditate, desire to practice, desire to do good things for people. The reason desire itself has to be overcome is as the mind purifies and goes into purified consciousness, it is perfectly pristine and still. That stillness is beyond good and bad, beyond right and wrong. Anything that moves that or disturbs that is a desire, it's a motivation. And that will make impure the purified consciousness. So our practice as a meditator is to purify that consciousness back until you get to that point where you can see clearly that consciousness is beautiful and pristine, and any movement that I make to it, anything I try and add to it, is going to delete from its purity. Now, as Wagner identified, and this is not Theravada Buddhism but Mahayana Buddhism, is after that enlightenment, desire then becomes the servant. So then desire is used for good things. But you have to be enlightened first. In the meantime, in our practice, of course, we do have to have desire. The desire for vegetarian sausages a couple of weeks ago. Go ahead. You have the mic.
Two questions. Two different ones. You started your talk about storytelling and how you said stories are better than explaining facts. Right?
Well, different. Yeah, there's another way to do it. Yeah.
Touching you emotionally, your explanation of Parsifal was very complex. So nobody would, unless you were a scholar, nobody would probably understand what's the nature of the story. So why does my emotionally touch you? There seems to be little chance of understanding, like, what's the morale of the story? What should I take away from it? So my first question is about, isn't Star Wars much better in terms of people understanding good and bad and desire and so on and so on and so on. And the second question is, how do you personally deal with desire?
Star Wars is kind of better, but that was the hero's journey rather than the Fisher's King. So the Fisher King is a specific subset of the hero's journey. So in the hero's journey, Luke, you always have a evil thing and then the tool of the evil lord. So in Parsifal, this Klingsord is the delusion, but his tool is Kundry, desire. In Star Wars, the evil lord is the Emperor, but his tool is Darth Vader. So there's always the ultimate evil isn't very powerful, but they always have a henchman, and it's a henchman that you have to fight in the end. The actual highest evil is never that difficult. This goes throughout stories. So Star Wars didn't have a Grail kingdom. It never suggested what the goal was going to be anywhere in there. Well, the Force is the nature of the universe, is the Dharma, but it's not the goal. What's the goal? What does Luke Skywalker become? And this is one of the big sellouts in Star Wars. At the end of Star Wars, he stands there and he gets a Medal of Bravery. You're like, no, this is the innocent, the quality of innocence overcoming the quality of hatred, which is the tool of malice. You don't get a medal. So mythologically, yeah, Star Wars went awry. The question of the meaning of the story. One is people used to know the meanings of these stories. And take someone like the Grimm brothers. They really understood what they were doing. And they claimed that they just heard these stories from their nurse, right? And they wrote them down. It's not true. If you look at the earlier versions to the later versions, they were constantly working on these stories. So they changed a lot of mothers into stepmothers, for instance, because you're not supposed to dislike your mother. In the original stories, you're supposed to reject the mother, which means leaving the worldly stuff, and going into the spiritual journey necessitates a leaving of some kind of the world. So yeah, you would reject the mother, but the Grimms said, well, we don't want to reject mothers, so we'll make them evil stepmothers instead. We'll make it a little more palatable. But they did this deliberately and specifically. So people used to know the meanings of these stories. But the other thing is, what if you know enlightenment? How do you put that message through for future generations? So this is the method that has come down, that the people who have taught enlightenment, which is difficult to encapsulate, they've done it through these Fisher King stories. Yeah. And specifically the motif of a happiness that is, or food usually, that is endlessly provided without cost. Happiness that arises without cost, which is purified consciousness, is perfectly happy without paying the cost of being reliant on sense pleasures. Yeah.
His second question?
Yeah, I was avoiding that.
Yeah, I realized that. That's why I said his second question.
I'm just so full of desires. I want my vegetarian sausages. I try and be vegetarian. It's not easy in a Thai monastery because it's all meat. So I do eat fish and prawns, I guess, but otherwise I would starve. You know, and you always have little desires throughout the day. You know, I want this person to shut up. I don't want it to rain while I'm walking. I've just been, last 2 months I've been in the dentist every week, 2 hours every week, having my things done. I wanted to stop. I don't want to pay the bill. So you always have desires. You can't do whack-a-mole. Any desire that comes up, you whack it. And I've seen a lot of monks, young monks especially, forest monks especially, and they get into the temple and like, I have no desires. You bring food, I'll have any kind of food. I don't care about my lodging, I don't care about mosquitoes, and they just try to not, and they're going to crash. You know, every time they're going to crash if they're coming in with that attitude. Never going to work. Whack-a-mole of desires is never going to work. So, in meditation, it becomes perfectly self-evident. As you sit there and try and meditate, something's going to come in to distract your attention. That there is a motivation. It's a motivation to send attention out. That motivation is desire. That's what we're actually talking about. Holding yourself in that pristine awareness, not letting the attention go out to anything. At some point, the mind turns around in on itself and suddenly becomes aware of its own nature. And will energize, become very bright. It's like a liquid light will course through the veins and a power comes through the body. And you're like, oh yeah, that's right. It's clear. This is perfectly clear. And those insights then come from the meditation. It's not something you can explain. Otherwise, we'd simply tell people and they'd be like, oh, I get it, yeah. Nah. You have to touch it. So that's what we're doing with the practice. Tom is desiring to end the session because we have...
One more question.
Okay.
If we have time. No worries.
No, briefly. And also I'll still be here afterwards, so if anyone wants to chat further, you can.
Could you speak a bit more about innocence as a foil to evil or desire? It's not a motif I've heard much about before.
So innocence means not having done anything wrong. And there is always this play with characters in stories that initially, depending on whether it's a fairy tale or a straightforward archetype story, but initially the innocence will be because of stupidity, because you don't know. Only when innocence becomes purity because of wisdom, then you will get the enlightenment. So in Parsifal, the old king keeps saying, one will come who is compassionate through wisdom, innocent through knowledge. And he repeats this over and over and over again, prophesizing that Parsifal will come. If you know Samson Delilah, hair always represents innocence. I'm quite sure why, but so Samson was immensely strong and he could defeat all the Philistines with the jawbone of a donkey. Donkeys are dumb. So this is innocence, but it's dumb. He doesn't know yet. This is purity, but just because hasn't figured stuff out. Later, after Samson has his eyes plucked out, he's chained and he's put to work, he will eventually push down the pillars of the temple and everybody dies, including Samson. But this is because he now knows. He now calls on God, give me my strength one more time. So, in Parsifal's case, he kills a swan. And he kills the swan. They say, why did you do it? He says, well, I didn't know that you're not supposed to kill. So he had a purified mind. He represents purified consciousness, but it hasn't awakened yet. And by the way, Joe, a pagan place, water boys? Why did I come here? Who gave him the key? Who put it in his hand so mysteriously? Who shot this arrow? How high did it fly? I tipped it with poison. I didn't even know why. The song is about Parsifal. He tipped the arrow with poison and he shot it and he killed the swan and he didn't know why. And now he finds himself here in a pagan place. He knows the song I'm talking about.
Water boys were Scottish, Irish,
Right.
they're still going.
Yeah, they don't have that big sound they used to have. But Pagan Place, the song, is specifically about the Fisher King. And he tipped the arrow with poison, he shoots the swan, who brought me here in this pagan place. Okay, we're ready.
Yeah, we have to have the paid for announcements.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, so John, you will be here afterwards if anyone wants to carry on the conversation.
Sure.
That was 90 minutes of almost pure scholarship, and I think for the first time I actually followed every minute of it. So either I'm getting better at this or you're getting better at this. I don't want to say. But yeah, thank you very much for space, we had no home. So we try to maintain a very close relationship with Bonnery, and if you could donate, if you feel like it, if you could donate any money to them, it would be wonderful. And the last bit, two last bits of business, the chairs would be helpfully moved into this room, and the white chairs would be going into that room. And Kate, into that room, yeah, that room. Yes?
Behind the white shirt.
Okay, so any doubts about what's happening, you should talk to Elijah. And Joe, sometimes you may or may not be wanting to do some coffee thing afterwards, but if you do, are you planning to do a coffee thing today?
Yeah, sure. Some of us will usually go to a nearby cafe or restaurant afterwards to continue the conversation or just to, get to know each other better. So everyone is welcome to join. We'll be out on the balcony or at the bottom of the stairs.
All right, so let's just have our blessing.
Sabitiyo vivachantu sabharogo vinasatu mate bhavadvantarayo sukhiti gayuko bhava abhivadana sili sanichang vuta pachayino chataro dhamma vadanti ayuvano sukhang balang. Yeah, okay, I'll be here next week. And I'm here till November anyway, so we'll be here every week till November. But will not be me, will be other people also.
Okay, so,